Hello, and welcome to Ed Talks with Khan Academy. I am excited today to be talking to Fenesha Hubbard, who is with NWEA, one of our partner organizations that we'll talk more about in a minute. And she is the Professional Learning Design Coordinator. So I'm excited to talk to her about professional learning for teachers. Before we get started, I want to remind everyone that Khan Academy is a nonprofit organization, and we are able to do our work through donations from people like you. If you go to khanacademy.org/donate, you will find a way that you can help us continue this work through your donations. Thank you. I also want to recognize some of our sponsors who really helped support us through the COVID-19 crisis. And that includes Bank of America, AT&T, Google.org, Novartis, Fastly, and General Motors. Thank you. And finally, if you have missed some other Ed Talks in homerooms, you can find us audio versions of those talks on your favorite podcast provider at looking for Homeroom with Sal. And you can listen to Sal and I interview other folks who are influencers in the education world. And with that, let me welcome Fenesha. Fenesha, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Kristen. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So first, let me just give a quick background for folks on who is NWEA. So NWEA, as I said, is one of our partner organizations, and they're a nonprofit that supports students and educators in more than 146 countries doing research, assessment solutions, policy and advocacy services, professional learning, and school improvement services. And I know that core to NWEA's work is really fighting for equity, driving impact in classrooms, and pushing for systemic change in our education communities. So that is a big bunch of work to bite off. Tell me what your role is.
Kristen, I love being at NWEA. I've been at NWEA for about 10 years, and what I do is really support our educators nationwide, and I do that by designing the professional learning that teachers need to stay on top of their craft. I really enjoy the work.
That is awesome. How did you get into that? How did you get to be in this role supporting teachers?
I think to support teachers in this way, you had to have been a teacher. So that's how I started my career. I started teaching middle school math in a very large school district, and it was through an alternative certification program for career changers. So these were people who had established careers. They said, you know what, I really want to support students. And so started off doing that, and then was very quickly immersed into the world of professional learning. And so I started designing learning for teachers, coaching teachers in math, and that led me to where I am today.
That is awesome. So I mentioned that one of the things that NWEA does is research and understanding more about student learning. And I know you've just released a report on learning during COVID. What were the kinds of questions you were investigating?
Yeah, great question. Our research team, Kristen, really wanted to see how students were faring during the pandemic. That was our main focus. And what we noticed is that if we focus on the good, gains were made, right? These were very challenging 2 years, but gains were made. However, students showed a lower performance compared to the past trends. And when we think about math education, there were declines in math across all the grades and all the groups. So we think about, but you have a nice visual there. The largest declines in math, Kristen, were among students of color and students in high poverty schools. And so I think one of the biggest things we should do right now is probably talk about what are we going to do about it.
Absolutely. I like the positive that people did learn something over the pandemic, but didn't get as far as we would have liked them to get, likely. So let's start with parents and thinking about parents first. What can parents do to support students in learning math?
That is the question, particularly because so many of our young people spent good quality time with their parents these past couple of years. So I know that question was coming up repeatedly. As a parent, how can I support my child? What do I need to do? I think, Kristen, what we really want to encourage parents to do is get their students talking about math. We want to help young people get their thoughts out of their heads and let it come out and come through in the best way that students can do that. I think we can actually learn a lot from our young people in the sense that students always ask why does this work, why do I do it that way. I think as parents we need to do that same thing, start asking why a lot more of our students, particularly when they come to us and they might say, hey, can you help me work through this problem, or I don't understand. Throw that question out there. Well, why would you do this, and why does this work, and why do you think that? And I think that helps us to really get insight into how students are thinking about math and the ways that they think about it.
That makes sense. I've heard friends who are parents worry about what do they do if they don't know the answer, if they don't know how to do a math problem that their child brings to them. Any suggestions for that?
I think Khan Academy is a great suggestion. But before
I wasn't trying to lead you there. But
I think before we start seeking external resources, like Khan Academy is a great external resource, but I think really having the students step into the position of an empowered learner with their parent is going to be key. So empowered learner meaning, you know what, I do bring something to the table. I do have something that I understand about the content, but I also have a stumbling block. And so if I can come to the table and start talking through my misconceptions as a parent, what you can do is just help guide my thinking, help pull it out of me. You don't need to know all of the content to do that. You just need to know how to ask really good questions and how to read me as your child and understand my body language and the things that I might be stumbling on and the things that I'm confident about.
that makes sense. And I know there's good research to support that using the language of math and just talking about math as being really important in learning outcomes. So that totally makes sense. It's about having the conversation sometimes instead of having to find the right answer right away. That
That's
rings
right.
true. Right. All right. So what about teachers? We've got this idea of these maybe learning gaps that have opened up where students aren't where they might have been in the past coming into the new year. What should teachers be thinking about to address some of that?
That's a really good question too. I think one, we should all come to an agreement that there was a lot of interrupted learning that took place. And I think once people are okay with admitting that, you know what, there were some breaks in the routines and how we learned. And because of that interrupted learning, students might have some unfinished learning. And the unfinished learning are like the skills and the prerequisite knowledge that students might need in order to be ready to learn what's coming next. And so I think teachers are well positioned right now to really assess what unfinished learning students might have. And they can do that through the use of assessments. The data can tell us what students might be ready to learn, what they might have already mastered. And we can do that through actual tests. And we can also do that through formative assessment, which is something that teachers do so skillfully every day. And that's informal ways to get data to inform instruction right on the spot, real time.
What are some of your favorite of those kind of more informal things that teachers do to start to understand where students are and what their skills are?
Oh, that's a great question. I love math language routines. And so I think about a math language routine of the problem of three reads, for example. So we're working on a math problem. I'm simply going to start off by asking you to read the problem, and then I'm going to ask you, what is this problem asking us about? So in simply asking that question, I'm getting an understanding of how my students are interpreting that. And then we might read the question again. And then I'll say, okay, well, what information do we need in order to solve this problem? So that gives me insight into the student's level of readiness in terms of, background knowledge that they might need. And so it's really helping me to unpack the context and the purpose from my students' understanding. Teachers are generally very well skilled at these strategies that we might use. Another thing we might do are entrance and exit tickets.
Wait, I think you said 3 reads. Is there a third read? Did I hear the third read?
Oh, did I miss? Hold on. Okay, let's go back. So the 3 reads.
Let's
so the
go
first
back.
one is read the problem. And then I say, okay, what is this problem about? And then you're telling me what you think the problem is about. I'm
Yep.
not confirming or affirming. I just want to know. The
Yep.
second read, now I ask you, what are we trying to find out? So a little different there. You know what,
Got
parents
it.
can use it too. So parents, I hope you're taking note. What are we trying to find out? And then we read the problem again. And now I'm going to ask you, what information might be useful to solve this? So in knowing the information,
Okay.
now we're starting to get at what the math is behind that. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yes. Yes. And that sounds like the teacher would get a lot of information about what the student knows and what they can do and all of those from that kind of interaction. Great.
Definitely. I think the intent is to really get behind what students are thinking. How are you thinking about the math? And that helps me to understand what you know about the math and what misconceptions you might have.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you see as the biggest challenges teachers face in teaching math? And maybe it's different for elementary students versus older teachers of older students, but just what are some of the big challenges?
I think the challenge that we faced since like time immemorial is it's been illuminated and heightened during the pandemic. And that's the challenge of how do I meet the needs of so many different levels of readiness in my classroom? If I teach seventh grade math, but I have students who are academically ready for content maybe at the fifth grade level, or I have students who might be ready to be challenged a little more at the ninth grade level. As a seventh grade math teacher, the challenge for me then becomes making sure I have a good depth and breadth of understanding of the content and that I can really scaffold my instruction for my students no matter where they are. That is a huge challenge that was heightened during the pandemic. And when I say scaffolding, that's literally thinking about how you might build structures to help students grow from where they are in the learning. Does that make sense, Kristen? Yeah.
It does, it does. And so now if we have students where there's even more variability throughout the class of where students are, we've got even more levels that teachers are trying to address. What are some of the things they can do if they have students who are at 7 different levels in what they're trying to learn?
I think we want to first encourage teachers to stay grounded in what the expectation and the standard is for the students. Because if you immediately, and I'm only saying this from a teacher who has the experience, I've taught in a classroom where you have students who their literacy level is pretty much non-existent versus students who are just need to be challenged and since a higher level math. I have been there. Okay, so I understand the um, the immediate reaction to first go to like the reality of the fact that I have to cover so much content with all of these students. And I think if we start at that point, it feels too overwhelming. It can feel pretty daunting. That's a daunting task. So I think it's important for our teachers to really get clear on what is it that my students need to know, what's the grade level standard, and what are the expectations that I personally hold for my students. Um, I had just mentioned the interrupted and unfinished learning. Sometimes, Kristen, when we have a lot of interrupted learning, it can lead to assumptions, meaning I can very easily assume that my students don't know A, B, or C content simply because of the fact that they missed so much. And I think when we have assumptions like that, I have a colleague, Chase Nordiger, and he always says that assumptions are a threat to equity. And I think in this case, assumptions could be a threat to equity because then it could start to limit the content that our students are exposed to. And ultimately, what we want to do is make sure that we're exposing our students to grade level content, regardless of where their readiness level might be. And the challenge then for teachers is how to do that. That's the biggest challenge. That was a challenge I faced throughout my entire career, is helping people understand how do I keep my students engaged at levels that honor where they are, but still hold the standard or expectation for their grade level. And I think that is a matter of really getting clear on the content. So let's make it real.
Yeah.
If I'm a student who really is still struggling with my multiplication facts, for the life of me, I cannot tell you what 7 times 6 is. That trips me up every single time. That should not stop me from then being able to learn about measurement in terms of area and volume. Now the job becomes for my teachers, how do I still teach me this higher level concept, while still throwing in opportunities for me to practice my facts. That's a daily challenge that teachers face. So we want to make sure that we still expose students to that higher level standard that we want them to be at. Another challenge for teachers then is to really understand their content across grade levels, right? So we think about, yes, if I teach 7th grade math, I have to be a master at that, but I also need to understand 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade math, and 6th grade, and then 8th, 9th, and 10th grade math, because there are some concepts that you teach where you absolutely have to know the prerequisite skills. You have to know them. And so now my job then as a teacher is to figure out, how do I weave that knowing into the lessons? Is that making sense, Kristen?
It absolutely does. And I think that point about having both the exposure to grade level skills and the ability to start to practice those prerequisites that are really necessary to be successful on those grade level skills is such a difficult balance. There's only so many hours in the day of where students get. And for a teacher, I can imagine, do teachers need to basically prepare lots of different lessons? Or how do they think about preparing, say, that area unit? And they know they have some students that struggle with multiplication, but they have some students who maybe already understand volume and kind of increase. How do they go about the preparation for teaching that area standard?
I feel overwhelmed just hearing that question, because if I were a teacher who thought that I had to then plan a bunch of different lessons to meet the needs of all of my students, I would probably decide that, you know what, I probably need a break from teaching. We don't want to take that perspective of needing to design lessons that meet the needs of every single student, in the sense that I'm designing a lesson for each student group in my class. That's not the approach we want to take. What we want to do is really make sure we understand what the big lesson is that we're teaching, and in our lesson design, build in opportunities to really have student discourse. We have to have students talking, telling how they're thinking. And the reason you're doing that is because you're leveraging your students' funds of knowledge in the classroom. You're helping them to support the instruction of this lesson. So what does that mean in layman's terms? If I have a student in my classroom who's really struggling with those basic facts, and that's keeping them from understanding how we're doing the Pythagorean theorem and how we're drawing that out using triangles to figure it out. What I want to do then is make sure I'm asking questions that gets that student talking about what they understand, and then possibly showing their work and how they're thinking. And then as a teacher, this gives me an opportunity now to maybe take how my students are thinking and start to tell a story, right? So if I'm engaging in a lesson and I know that I'm going to have a group of students who are going to get it right away, I'm not going to start off by using their work as an exemplar. I want to tell a story that builds on the math, such that I'm starting with a student who is missing, they might have greater misconceptions, right? And then I'm going to build on that, and I'm going to draw in another student's sample work where they have a greater understanding. And in building that story, then students can start to have a better understanding of the concepts. So that's a very long-winded way of saying we're not designing lessons. You're not taking one lesson and designing like 30 other mini lessons to go with it. What you're doing is building in opportunities in the lesson that you're designing to uncover what students know, to give everybody an opportunity to engage no matter what they know, right? So if you are just at the level of the basic level on this ladder of instruction that we're climbing, then I want to make sure you have a voice in this discussion, in this lesson. So I'm building in equitable opportunities for everyone to participate. And in doing that, ultimately, I'm going to meet my goal of making sure that all students are getting access to that top rung and they're moving up the ladder.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So both of us work for organizations that believe that technology can potentially have a role in helping to address this particular problem of thinking about differentiation and making sure that students get the support they need and access to grade level material. And we're really happy with our partnership that's created something called MAP Accelerator to help teachers meet some of those needs. Can you talk a little bit about that MAP Accelerator experience and how it might fit into this?
Definitely. I'm really glad that you mentioned the MAP Accelerator. So Khan Academy has partnered with NWEA, and we've partnered to create MAP Accelerator. The reason behind the partnership is one, okay, Khan Academy by itself is a dynamic and wonderful tool. When you bring in MAP Growth, which is our assessment, MAP Growth is a test that students take, and the data, their results, tell us what they're ready to learn. It tells us what their level of readiness is. So it's not a test of mastery. It's not saying, all right, I'm going to test you on all the fifth grade skills to see, have you mastered those? It's going to say, I'm going to test you on a plethora of skills. And the test is going to adjust based on how you answer. Because what I'm trying to do is figure out what's your zone for learning, what's your zone of proximal development. And then once I have that information, it's put into MAP Accelerator, and then MAP Accelerator designs or creates a learning path for me as a student that grows with me. So it starts at my zone, and as I progress through my zone and I learn more, it moves with me. So it's just a wonderful, powerful tool that we have to really support teachers and the wide variety of student readiness in our classroom.
So we've got teachers doing all the great things that you described with those activities that are accessible for students who have skill gaps, but also challenge other students and all of that. And then paired with that, we have this tool that when students are working individually can help really target where they are based on those MAP growth scores and help bring those together. So that seems like a good balance. How do you see technology fitting into classrooms?
That is the key question. Now, we have to put this all in context, Kristen. We have to keep in mind that our students have engaged with technology over the past couple of years in a way that was very different than how they had engaged before, right? So we have to be mindful of the fact that our students, they feel some type of way about technology. They could feel overwhelmed. They could have gotten into certain routines. So what we want to do is really empower teachers and students to have the routines that you want to employ for MAP Accelerator. A routine might be, we've got 30 minutes a week. That's our MAP Accelerator time. That's my Khan Academy time. And then let's create some rituals to support that. And the ritual might be something like a Talk It Out Tuesday, or a Work It Out Wednesday, or a Think About It Thursday. So what we want to do is create these rituals that engage students and teachers together. So we've got the technology in the center, but we want to use our discourse to bring us together so that it becomes an interactive tool for everybody. So a teacher might say, all right, it's Talk It Out Tuesday. What I want you to do after your MAP Accelerator time is go back and find that one problem that you kept getting stumped on. You kept having to hit the hint function for. The problem just, you had a little struggle with it, productive struggle. And what I want you to do is now talk it out with a partner in the classroom. And in the talking it out, you might gain a little bit more clarity. Or we could have a Work It Out Wednesday where students are encouraged to go to their caregivers and show and tell. Let them see a MAP Accelerator experience, and then work it out with that person. So that gives the student an opportunity to then step outside of their head, do their thinking out loud, and continue working on their path. So I think, Kristen, what we want to do is leverage technology in a way that's really going to empower our students right now, really being mindful about the experiences they've had these past couple of years, and how do we re-empower them.
Yeah, I heard a couple things. I heard the peer-to-peer learning piece going on, and we know that that's powerful. And then I heard them explaining to a caregiver, which then puts them, goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning about using math language with with an adult maybe, and they can become the expert and explain how it's done. I like both of those ideas where we're not just having students sitting in front of a computer isolated by themselves, but creating more of a community around the technology.
That's right. We need to have so much more discourse. I mean, that's what's going to bring everything alive.
Yeah. And I feel like after this past year, everyone is just really eager to make those personal connections with people that were more difficult when we were in all in quarantine and in the COVID situation.
That's right.
So we talked a bit about both the past year and how those students were faring. And one of the biggest questions we got was, how do we keep students motivated? How do we keep them engaged in learning and what they're doing? So what are tools? Are there technology tools that can help keep students engaged? And what other suggestions do you have for teachers?
Yeah, well, one, Map Accelerator. So we definitely want to make sure that whatever digital tools that we're using with our young people, we're making it something so that it's not, it is a self-regulated tool for them, but we have to find ways to stay engaged with them, and get regular feedback from them and allow them time to share with us what they're doing. So I think that's one of the biggest tools that we need to employ. I would love to see teachers supporting students in goal setting more, because we all like to experience success. It feels good. It empowers us, right? It gives us inspiration and motivation to keep moving forward. And so I would love to see teachers working alongside students to set goals with their MAP Accelerator, and then checking in on those goals regularly, short-term goals too. So we're not talking about by the end of the school year, I want you to be able to do this. No, I might set a weekly goal because I have weekly MAP Accelerator time, and that goal could be around 2 or 3 skills. And I want to make sure that's an achievable goal. It feels achievable. And it's something that I can track my own progress on. And I can talk about it and I can find reasons to celebrate.
Fenesha, you're speaking my language. I can't tell you how often I talk about goals and goal setting, and that is a way to motivate, because yeah, we are motivated when we see success and when we feel like we're going to be successful. And nothing shows success like past success. So
That's
yeah,
right.
goal setting is huge for me. So love that we're connected on that. So we're almost already out of time. We have a couple of questions. We have a question from Facebook from Charles Drayden, who has just, this might be a good one to end on. I have a young child. How can I help him flourish in his math studies? And I like that question, that isn't just succeed, but flourish. So any other tips you have that we haven't gotten to?
Well, thank you so much for that question, and thank you for chiming in on Facebook. I think it's really important for parents and caregivers to find ways to bring math alive in our students' everyday life. And sometimes people say, I don't even know how I use math in my everyday life. Let me tell you, one of my favorite books, it's a book called Math Curse. It's a children's book, and it just talks about how everything is a math problem. So a lot of our school students are starting back at school. You might have an 8th grader who doesn't have to wear a uniform to school every day, and they have the opportunity to express themselves. And at that age, it's all about them anyway. And so how does that turn into a math problem? You could ask them, how many different outfits could you put together from these 4 or 5 items of clothing? That's a math problem. You might have a 2nd grader who's totally fascinated by the cicadas. Well, here in the Midwest, at least, we have cicadas. It's cicadas.
I've heard.
Yes, and at nighttime, the sound is beautiful. And so they might be so fascinated by cicadas and grasshoppers and crickets. How does that turn into a math problem? I want you to go listen to those insects, and I want you to tell me who's chirping the fastest. So now we're talking about frequency, right? So everything becomes a math problem. So Charles, what I think you and other parents can do is really find ways to make math come alive in everyday life, because math is fun and it should be fun. And we have to all be able to say that learning is fun. Let's not forget that.
That seems like a great note to end this on. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was great to hear your wisdom and ideas, and I love that you are out there working with teachers to better support students for learning.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Always a joy working with Khan Academy. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Thank you all, and we will see you next time.